Step back to the 1950s when hearty breakfasts weren't expensive luxuries but clever creations born of thrift and tradition. These 10 forgotten dishes reveal how American families stretched every dollar while carrying hidden Native American influences that shaped the nation's table. Before fast food chains and sugary cereals, breakfast was about survival, comfort, and flavor. Stay with us, because these recipes might just inspire your own kitchen today. Don't forget, like, share, and subscribe for more timeless food history. Picture a farmhouse kitchen at dawn, the window panes fogged from the steam of boiling water and the scent of cornmeal drifting through the air. On the griddle, small golden rounds sizzle gently. Johnny cakes, one of America's oldest breakfasts still alive in the 1950s. They weren't fancy, but they carried centuries of history. From Native American roots to Southern kitchens, Johnny cakes were born of necessity. Just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt transformed into something hearty enough to start the day. What made them special wasn't just their flavor, crispy edges giving way to soft, warm centers, but the resilience they symbolized. In the 50s, when every penny mattered, Johnny cakes stood as proof that a handful of ingredients could still bring comfort and strength. Families topped them with butter, syrup, or even molasses if the pantry was kind. Every bite whispered stories of heritage, of making do, of finding satisfaction in simplicity. Today we think of pancakes stacked high in diners, but Johnny cakes remind us of a slower, sturdier America where breakfast tasted like history itself. They weren't just food, they were survival served hot on a plate. Now imagine a chilly morning in the 1950s when the frost still clung to the window glass and the house was slow to warm. On the stovetop, a pot of leftover rice is slowly transformed into something magical: rice pudding with raisins. Milk, often powdered or evaporated, is stirred in with sugar, a touch of vanilla, and those humble raisins that swell into sweet, chewy gems as they simmer. The aroma of cinnamon or nutmeg sometimes floated through the kitchen, wrapping the family in comfort before a single spoonful was tasted. This dish wasn't just breakfast. It was a gentle embrace. It made use of every scrap, proving that yesterday's rice could become today's delight. For children, it felt like dessert at the start of the day, a rare luxury in a time when every meal had to stretch. For parents, it was practical, nourishing, and reliable. Today, rice pudding is dressed up with exotic spices in trendy cafes, but back then it was stripped down and honest, just enough sweetness to soften the morning. Each bite carried warmth and reassurance, a reminder that even the simplest ingredients could create memories that linger long after the bowl was empty. Picture a skillet sizzling on a stovetop in the 1950s, the kitchen filled with the savory scent of frying potatoes, mingled with the unmistakable aroma of Spam. This was Spam and potato hash, a dish born out of war rations and carried proudly into peacetime kitchens. Cubes of golden potatoes crisp around the edges, while pink squares of Spam caramelized beside them, sometimes joined by onions for a touch of sweetness. It was unpretentious, filling, and just right for the hardworking families who needed energy to face a long day. What made this dish unforgettable was its resilience. Spam, that humble canned meat, lasted forever on the pantry shelf, and potatoes were cheap, hearty, and always available. Together they created a breakfast that wasn't glamorous but dependable, a hot plate of sustenance that could see you through factory shifts, school days, or farm chores. Today, Spam has found its way back into trendy restaurants and fusion menus, but in the 50s, it was never about novelty. It was about survival, thrift, and comfort, sizzling together in one pan. For many, the memory of Spam hash is less about taste and more about the sound, the crackle of the skillet, the scrape of the spatula, and the call to gather at the table. Imagine walking into a kitchen where yesterday's pot of oatmeal still sits cold on a stove, thick and heavy. In the 1950s, nothing went to waste, and that humble leftover became the base for something unexpectedly comforting: oatmeal griddle cakes, mixed with a bit of flour, maybe an egg if you had one, and fried in a well-seasoned cast iron skillet, slicked with bacon grease. The batter sizzled into rustic golden cakes. Crisp on the outside, tender on the inside, they carried the warmth of porridge but the joy of pancakes. These cakes weren't just about thrift, they were about transformation. Children who groaned at a reheated bowl of oatmeal smiled when they were handed a plate stacked high with griddle cakes, steam rising like morning fog. Butter and syrup made them sweet, applesauce or jam gave them character, but even plain, they filled bellies with pride and care. Today we call it zero-waste cooking, but back then it was simply life. Yesterday's meal reborn into something that tasted like love. And for many, the memory of oatmeal griddle cakes isn't just about flavor, it's about watching a mother's quiet ingenuity turn scraps into breakfast that felt abundant. Picture the gentle hush of a 1950s kitchen where the clink of a whisk and the soft pour of milk into glass dishes promise something tender, oven-baked custard. Made from the simplest pantry staples, milk, eggs, sugar, and a whisper of vanilla, it filled the house with a warm, sweet scent that wrapped around the family like a quilt. Slowly baked in a water bath, the custard set into silky spoonfuls with a golden skin on top, offering comfort without extravagance. This dish was more than food, it was reassurance. Grandmothers made it for children with colds. Mothers baked it when eggs were few, but love was abundant. It carried a softness that spoke of care, a sweetness that didn't overwhelm but lingered gently on the tongue. In the 50s, custard blurred the line between necessity and indulgence. It was both survival and treat in one dish. Today we dress it up as creme brulee with torched sugar crusts, but back then it was humble, healing, and quietly profound. Each spoonful reminded families that patience and simplicity could create something lasting. It wasn't just breakfast, it was memory, tradition, and love baked into every bite. If you're enjoying this trip back in time, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more journeys into America's forgotten kitchens. Now step into a modest kitchen where the skillet has just finished sizzling a batch of bacon. In the 1950s, that leftover grease wasn't waste, it was liquid gold. Mothers poured a little over toasted bread, then spread a thick layer of peanut butter on top. The heat melted it ever so slightly, blending salty, smoky drippings with nutty richness. It was bold, filling, and deeply satisfying, the kind of breakfast that could carry a worker through long hours or a child through a school day. What made this dish unforgettable was its resourcefulness. At a time when every penny mattered, families learned to pull flavor out of scraps. Bacon grease, flavored vegetables, fried eggs, and yes, even found its way into breakfast toasts. The result was a salty, sweet marvel, eaten quickly before the bread cooled and the grease lost its shimmer. Today, nutrition labels might shudder at the thought, but back then, no one was counting calories. They were counting strength, thrift, and flavor. For many, the memory of peanut butter toast with bacon drippings is tied to the smell of mornings, the hum of percolated coffee, and the quiet genius of making something extraordinary out of what little you had. Picture a southern kitchen in the 1950s flour, dust rising like morning light across a wooden table. There's no fancy cutter here, just a drinking glass pressed into dough, shaping rounds of lard biscuits that would soon puff and brown in the oven. Cheap, humble, and made with what was on hand, these biscuits were the quiet centerpiece of countless breakfasts. What gave them their soul was the lard. Butter was costly, shortening was sometimes scarce, but lard saved from the family's own pigs or bought inexpensively was always there. It made the biscuits tender inside and golden on top with a richness that felt far greater than the sum of flour, milk, and salt. Families split them open for fried eggs, tucked in slices of ham, or smeared them with apple jelly. You didn't just eat one, you always reached for another while they were still warm. Today, many wrinkle their noses at lard, reaching for olive oil or plant-based spreads. But in the 50s, a good biscuit wasn't judged by ingredients, it was measured by flake height and how the steam rose as you pulled it apart. Each bite was tradition, resilience, and love baked into something that didn't need to impress anyone. It only needed to feed you heart and soul. Close your eyes and hear it, the metallic crack of a can opener, the hiss of meat hitting a hot skillet, and the soft clink of eggshells breaking. In the 1950s, canned hash and eggs were a weekday miracle, fast, cheap, and hearty enough to silence growling stomachs. Corned beef or roast beef hash mixed with potatoes and seasoning, browned in a cast iron pan until crispy around the edges. Then came the eggs cracked right on top, their yolks settling into little craters like suns rising over a meaty landscape. This was the breakfast of busy parents and hungry kids, practical yet oddly comforting. It wasn't about elegance, it was about energy, about stretching one tin into a meal that felt like abundance. The smell of sizzling hash mingled with the sound of Elvis or Perry Como on the radio, making mornings feel alive even when money was tight. Today, brunch menus glamorize hash with artisanal meats and root vegetables, but none of them match the honest flavor of that canned version. For families of the 50s, it wasn't just food, it was ritual, resilience, and a reminder that you could always make do. So tell me, between Johnny cakes, rice pudding, Spam hash, oatmeal griddle cakes, oven custard, peanut butter, toast lard biscuits, and canned hash with eggs, which one stirs up the strongest memory for you? Now, picture a 1950s kitchen just after sunrise, the smell of coffee filling the air while a pan of white sauce thickens slowly on the stove. Into it go thin slices of salty dried beef, stirred until the gravy becomes rich and hearty. Ladled generously over toasted bread, this dish earned the nickname SOS, a military shorthand every veteran knew, though families politely called it creamed, chipped beef on toast. For soldiers returning from World War II and Korea, this wasn't just breakfast, it was memory. It reminded them of barracks mornings, of filling plates made from meager rations. At home, it became a staple because it was cheap filling and stretched what little meat a family could afford. Kids may have groaned, but parents appreciated its reliability, a meal that always showed up when money was tight and mouths were many. Today, you might spot it on a retro diner menu as a wink to the past, but back then, it was pure survival dressed in cream. It was salty, satisfying, and comforting in its own unglamorous way, a plate that symbolized resilience, thrift, and the humor families needed to get through hard times. We're down to the very top now. Only one dish remains, the crown of the 1950s breakfast table. If you're enjoying this trip through forgotten kitchens, remember your comments. Keep these memories alive, so drop yours below. At the very top of our journey sits perhaps the humblest of them all, cornmeal mush. Imagine a pot simmering slowly on a wood or gas stove in the 1950s. The mixture of cornmeal water and a pinch of salt thickening into something between porridge and polenta. It was plain, yes, but it was also the quiet hero of countless American breakfasts. Families poured it steaming hot into bowls on cold mornings, sometimes adding milk or sugar if the pantry allowed, but the true magic came the next day. Leftovers were pressed into a loaf pan, chilled overnight, then sliced and fried in bacon grease until the edges crisped golden. Served with syrup, apple butter, or maybe a sausage link if payday had just passed. Cornmeal mush turned from survival food into a comforting ritual. This dish carried more than calories. It carried memory, the smell of old kitchens, the sound of quiet mornings, and the ingenuity of parents who knew how to make little go a long way. Today, while oatmeal and smoothie bowls fill, Instagram feeds cornmeal mush remains gloriously unfashionable, and that's its charm. It reminds us that breakfast was never about looks. It was about survival, warmth, and the deep comfort of knowing you'd been fed. Our journey through these 10 breakfasts of the 1950s reminds us of something deeper than food. Every dish, whether it was a skillet of Spam hash, a bowl of rice pudding, or a simple slice of fried cornmeal mush, told a story of survival, ingenuity, and love. Families didn't waste. They stretched, they reinvented, and they created comfort out of scraps. These meals weren't glamorous, but they anchored mornings with warmth and stability, carrying generations through both lean days and ordinary ones. Today, surrounded by fast food and endless supermarket options, it's easy to forget that America's tables were once set with dishes born from resilience and resourcefulness. Revisiting them isn't just nostalgia, it's a way of honoring the quiet strength of those who came before us, who taught us that care didn't require abundance, only intention. So, which of these breakfasts stirs your own memories? Did your grandparents make one of these dishes, or do you still cook them in your home today? Share your stories below, we'd love to hear them. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Together we can keep these forgotten flavors and the lessons behind them alive for generations to come.